Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to bring this before you. And before I get started, there's an important acknowledgement that I'd like to make. Representative Lewis and I have been working together on this bill and an identical bill that she has that I believe is hopefully will be slated for next week, that we'll have an opportunity, my hope, to join those two bills together and continue the bipartisan efforts here to move this forward. I think it's a really important piece of legislation, obviously, and I just want to acknowledge her important role in this. You know, I like to find the good and magnify the good in things, and in early 2020, it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of good going on, but one of the really, I think, important things and good things that has come out of dealing with an international pandemic is the acknowledgement that a lot of the restrictions that we have had in place in government have made it more difficult for particularly healthcare professionals to do their job and to meet the needs of Missourians. And in March of 2020, we made some pretty big decisions here in Missouri to waive a number of the requirements around all kinds of professionals, but mostly related to healthcare professionals, to ensure that they had the flexibility to deal with the challenges that we had. And the acknowledgement essentially was that a lot of these restrictions don't fall in line with the requirement of what a license is supposed to do, which is to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the public. In fact, they were hindering that. So the governor issued an executive order that waived a lot of the requirements. By executive order, he was able to remove a lot of these restrictions. Unfortunately, when the emergency order has been lifted, a lot of those same requirements that made it difficult for healthcare professionals to practice are now back in place. And this morning, we're dealing specifically with the requirements around APRNs, okay, our advanced practice registered nurses. And I'm going to read you just a brief excerpt here of the press release from March of 2020, because it tells exactly why these requirements need to be made permanent. These requirements being lifted needs to be made permanent. We need to do away with these. It's critical that our health professionals be able to treat Missourians. We must provide more flexibility and alternative delivery methods for professionals in other states to provide care in Missouri. Our goal is to provide as much access to care as possible for the sake of all Missourians. The purpose is to allow healthcare professionals to provide care in areas of significant need without having the barrier of government licensure issues. Now, it was at the request of the Missouri State Board of Nursing and the Missouri Board of the Healing Arts that these went into effect, that they waived these requirements, okay? And there's four very simple requirements here. This bill simply makes those permanent. What has been in effect for the last 2 years, it says it worked, it is working, and it will continue to work, and it is right for all Missourians. So this bill takes the requirements that were waived during for the last 2 years for APRNs and makes them permanent. And I'm happy to go into some more detail about what those specifically are. If you have questions about it, we have a lot of experts here to testify for this bill as well. So I'm going to stop talking now in hopes that they will be able to answer some of the more perhaps specific questions and detailed questions.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill. Do you have any idea if you are planning on putting an emergency clause on this?
Yes, there is an emergency clause attached to this.
Okay, all right.
I think that's a really important piece. I assume you do as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I have constituents who have called here recently when the emergency rule was taken away on December 31st saying, hey, I can't see my doctor anymore. What's up with this? So, yeah. Yes, this is very important. Thank you.
It's urgent.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Representative Lewis.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you, Representative. It's been a pleasure working with you on this. And I just want to ask you, over the past 2 years where these waivers have been in place and we've had removal of barriers and increased access to our APRNs, has there been any evidence of harm to patients, to your knowledge?
None. Not one single case that has been brought to my attention. And that goes across the entire country. I'm not aware of a single instance.
Okay, great. I'm not either. In fact, it's been since the emergency was lifted, December 31st, that we've actually seen a negative impact in patient care. Is that correct?
I would say that's absolutely correct.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm obviously in support of your bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, thank you, Representative. So let's start out with those in favor of this bill. If you'll please come up, make sure you have the witness form and state your name and who you represent. Remember, we are trying to keep it to a 5-minute. Thank you very much to the previous witnesses. We were timing you, and everyone stayed in underneath the 5. Thank you very much. We'll proceed with you, ma'am. Thank you.
I only have about 20 pages here, so. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Julie Miller, and I'm a family nurse practitioner from here in Central Missouri. I live in California, Missouri, and I practice here in Jefferson City. And I'm representing myself. So much of what is said I certainly agree with, and I certainly agree with the lifting of all of the waivers permanently, but I really have a bugaboo about the 75-mile restriction. So permanent removal of the geographic proximity requirement is vital to help us solve the shortage of healthcare providers and will have a beneficial impact on people throughout the state, as previously discussed. During the governor's temporary suspension of the requirement from March 2020 to December 21, the Board of Nursing did not receive a single complaint, as previously verbalized, related to this waiver. This change also aligned Missouri with every other U.S. state and territory, none of which have this mileage restriction. In those 21 months, have we not proven that productive collaboration, meaningful connection can occur regardless of geographical proximity in every aspect of personal and professional life? Also, why is it that a nurse practitioner in Missouri can provide care via telemedicine, over the phone or video, and there's no collaborative physician mileage proximity requirement in that instance? Makes no sense. Prior to COVID, the regular use of technology such as Zoom, Teams, FaceTime, etc., even then, the mileage rule was illogical, but as a nurse practitioner in my clinic, if I have an emergency, I'm not calling my collaborating physician. I'm going to call 911. It doesn't matter if my collaborating physician is 7 miles away or 7,000 miles away. I'm going to do the same thing. Call 911. The distance between the two does not improve patient care. It does not increase access. It doesn't save lives. It only serves to squeeze the supply of providers available to patients even further, especially in rural areas of Missouri. These are probably statistics you know, but I'm going to remind you, we kind of stink at healthcare in Missouri. The Commonwealth Fund ranks Missouri 48th overall in health. Every Missouri rural county is deemed a professional health shortage area. Rural Missourians have higher mortality rates in all of the things, and I've got them listed here, but rural Missourians are more likely to die than those living in metropolitan areas. Life expectancy in Missouri is declining at a faster pace than the national average. So clearly, patients in rural Missouri are being hit especially hard by the shortage of health professions. Other statistics you probably know, nationwide, there's a predicted healthcare shortage of primary care providers by 2031 that ranges from 20,000 to 50,000 practitioners. Placing unnecessary limitations on nurse practitioners only makes this more concerning. So lots of people have been hard at work to lift these restrictions. Some of the people are in this room. For many years, we've encouraged our state legislators, such as yourselves, to pass laws that would remove barriers, such as this law that's being looked at now. Thanks largely to well-funded physician groups that oppose these changes, these things haven't moved forward. So, yes, collaborative practice between a nurse practitioner and a physician is currently required by Missouri statute and regulation. The ironic thing about this is that some of these issues would not require laws to be passed, and the 75-mile proximity requirement is one of them. The State Board of Nursing and the State Board of Registration for Healing Arts could come together, engage in joint rulemaking, and lift this unnecessary rule. The mission, as was discussed earlier, the mission of the State Board of Nursing is to protect the public's health. The mission of the Board of Registration for Healing Arts is to protect the citizens of the state through the licensing of physicians and other health professionals. I would argue that removing the 75-mile rule would both better serve the public's health and have no impact at all on licensing of physicians and other professionals. So as appointed members of these boards, I would also argue that it would be reasonable to expect they would serve the best interest of all Missourians. Given the state of health in Missouri, I believe the citizens of this state should expect these two groups to come together and engage in joint rulemaking, and this expectation is unmet. So while the law requires collaborative practice, nurses can't even bring the Board of Healing Arts to the table to discuss collaborative practice, and this seems ridiculous to me. So I think this is additional clear and compelling evidence for the need to make changes.
Thank you. Are there, excuse me, are there any questions for this? Yes, go ahead, Representative Dahl, proceed.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you.
So I absolutely support the bill. I just have a question that came to me from a constituent who is an APRN. So this would completely eliminate the distance, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So given that, she felt like during the pandemic when that was lifted, that there were out-of-state physicians that were coming in trying to act as the collaborating physician for Missouri APRNs, sort of taking advantage of the situation. Do you feel like that's a concern, and does there need to be some sort of amendment that would prohibit somebody in West Virginia from being the collaborating physician?
I don't believe that is a problem from the perspective of the APRN. That perhaps is more evidence that physicians are benefiting in some way or another through the collaboration.
Oh, absolutely. I understand.
So Missouri physicians might not like it because that would be money that's going to their physician counterpart in West Virginia. As far as an APRN, if I wanted to start an independent practice, I would shop out if collaboration remains a requirement, while a 75-mile proximity rule would be lifted, I would shop it out to where I could get it the most reasonably.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further questions for this witness? Seeing Representative Thomas.
Inquire, please.
Proceed.
Thank you. During the pandemic, were more than just the distance requirements eliminated? Was essentially independent practice happening? Because this bill certainly allows more than just eliminating the distance requirement.
There were other waivers. There was a 30-day collaboration period for new MPs, and there was a chart review that was also waived.
So they were waived.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if, they were waived, but was that actually taken up? Because allowing someone not to do that doesn't mean that people weren't going to do it. We had testimony last year talking about eliminating some of these practice requirements, and there were several nurse practitioners who said, very clearly, just because we don't have to do it, we'll be doing this, we're going to continue this, we're going to continue that, that's the way our practice is set up, we intend to do that. So do you have any idea, and that may be impossible to know because there's probably not data on that?
Yeah, I would say it's somewhat impossible to know. However, as a practicing APRN for the last decade, my 30-day collaboration at the initial onset of practice has been done a long time ago, sort of thing. So I don't feel like I'm an expert to speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Any further witnesses in favor?
Thank you, Chairman, respected members of the council, and Representative Grier. I'm here to speak in support of House Bill 2434. My name is Jim Wallis. I am the Director of Business Development for Chestnut Health Systems. This is my 33rd year in the behavioral health business, working with at-risk and vulnerable populations. Most of that time has been in Missouri. I live in Troy, Missouri. Grew up in St. Charles. But for the last 5 years, I've worked for Chestnut Health Systems, which has historically been based in Illinois, and we have a robust infrastructure over in the Metro East. So we're a community mental health center. We employ APRNs and work with those same vulnerable populations. In September of 2019, we were invited by a foundation in Jefferson County, Missouri, to come and provide services. They had long waiting list for individuals to get into treatment. That's substance use, mental health, as well as med prescribing for kids and adults. In fact, for med prescribing for children, sometimes there was a year-long wait. So we were invited to come in, and we applied and received funding. September of 2019, I, as Business Development Director, in that grant funding, looked to sustain that funding so that we remain in Missouri and continue to provide services. So my journey was to find a collaborating physician. That was a big task. So in September of 2019, all the way until March of 2020, lots of interviews, and there just was not somebody that we could get to collaborate with our Missouri licensed APRNs to do the services that we needed done. So not to be flippant, but to kind of piggyback on what Representative Grier had indicated earlier in March of 2020 with the pandemic waivers, we were allowed to kind of spread our wings and do what we needed to do in Jefferson County for those kids and adults that were waiting to get services from our APRN. So I'll just read you briefly a excerpt from my foundation report that went out about 6 months ago regarding medication prescribing. Our medication prescribing service is a service line which numbers are certainly reflective of the significant suffering during the pandemic. We have seen over the last year a 400% increase in this service, and this exponential increase has been primarily due to Chestnut's utilization of telehealth services. The loosening of certain telehealth rules during the pandemic have allowed our advanced psychiatric practice nurses to serve Jefferson County youth and adults via telehealth almost in real time. Our APRN nurse manager reports clients have reported they appreciate the services and feel they are being treated well. Clients feel validated. And again, good care is happening. So I'm hesitant to say thank God for the pandemic, but there would have been lives lost without the emergency telehealth waivers. So that being said, I look at the last 5 years of my experience and seeing some of the best practices in Illinois, as well as our neighboring, and there's been some mention of the state of Kansas. There are best practices that will allow for good quality services to happen with some of these rules to remain permanently in effect, some of these emergencies rules permanently in effect. One of the that I want to note, because it's been topical a couple of times, is the file review. So in Illinois, there's no requirement to review files. Instead, a requirement for monthly collaboration sessions with a collaborating physician or psychiatrist done via live video, phone, or in person, either one-on-one or with a group of APRNs. The purpose then is documented by the APRN, the purpose of which is discuss the individual patient's cases, medication recommendations, new procedures, processes, and practices. So what we have in our Metro East programming, we have 12 APRNs who monthly meet live via video with a board-certified psychiatrist out of the state of out of Chicago. And it works seamlessly well. So all of that said, I enthusiastically support House Bill 2434 for Missouri APRNs, and I am confident if this bill becomes law, lives will be saved. So Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any questions for this witness? Representative Thomas.
To inquire, please.
Proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I do have a question. It's on. Is it not? Okay, light's on. I guess I'm a little bit confused between what I'm hearing. Are you advocating for a continuation of just a lesser form or lesser restrictions in a collaborative practice arrangement versus what's essentially independent practice based on the reduction of pretty much all of the collaborative practice requirements in this bill?
Yeah, my support is exactly what the bill reads in terms of the emergency telehealth waiver rules that have allowed us to do what we were invited to Missouri to provide, continue on a permanent basis. We've seen good practice and individuals.
But you're still
being
describing a collaborative practice arrangement. That's what you all provide. You have monthly sessions, you have oversight and supervision, and that's not independent practice.
All right, that's an example of a best practice that has allowed us to do things versus the in-person 30-day preceptor, the 75 miles. So I didn't want to go into all of those details, but some of those are outdated.
Well, no, and I understand that part, but the bill is basically eliminating collaborative practice and the supervision requirements, and you are still including those. So you're really not advocating for what this bill's advocating for,
Well,
if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, and I could be confusing things here. What I just wanted to pull some examples of other states, but what I have seen as the person in charge of our Missouri programming, before the emergency waivers went into effect, we did nothing. We could not even get up and going. And because of these emergency waivers, we've done a tremendous amount of good work. And so that's what I'm focused on in Missouri. I did maybe muddy the discussion just pulling some examples of other states, but that was my point. These emergency waivers have saved lives, in my opinion, over our Missouri programming, and that's what I support.
So I'm going to interrupt real quick because I don't think that the bill is trying to do away with collaborative practices. I think that
The collaborative practice requirements.
no, I think that you're still
and
that-
supervision and in-person practice initially. Those are the collaborative practice requirements.
that there's still, if I'm understanding this bill right, and maybe the bill sponsor can correct me if I'm wrong, it still keeps the collaborative practice in place. It just eliminates the mileage and some of the other aspects of it. But the collaborative practice, the physician still
But
has
what type of collaborative working relationship is still left when you've taken away the basic tenets of collaborative practice, which include chart review and working together? Granted, that's the initial.
It's still there, I believe. Is it not?
Can
I'm sure we have some other folks here who can.
Okay.
we defer that
Yes.
to another witness?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. We'll
Awesome.
defer
Thank
that.
you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, please. In favor of? You'll state your name and who you represent. Thank you, ma'am. I was politely going to ask you if you could do that for us. It just helps us to hear you better. Thank you.
The older I get, the worse my multitasking gets. So, I'm Suzanne Opperman, and I am a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner.
Can I just get you to check your mic? And if it is on, that green light, can you get closer to the mic? It's
How's
on.
that?
Thank you.
Sure. I'm Suzanne Opperman. I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I've been a nurse since 1976. I have been an advanced practice nurse since 1999. I went back to school after I retired from the VA of 30 years and obtained my psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner certification as well. At the VA, I was a coordinator of the transplant and liver program and managed those patients essentially independently. At the time, the VA was still requiring collaborative practice, but they were there, but we never really saw each other much. The issue of my problem was when I graduated from the psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner program in Kansas City, I also obtained my medication-assisted treatment certification, and I'm in Columbia. There are, at the time when I started this, there were just a handful of physicians who had their medication-assisted treatment, which is considered a pretty much basic approach now for chemical addiction, which is what my specialty has become. I went back and then got a certification as a alcohol and drug counselor because of my inability to find a collaborative practice physician that met the criteria that I met to do my full job in the Columbia area. I could not go outside of the Columbia area to find someone where the need is really, really great. So currently, I have a private business where I am counseling clients who have chemical and activity dependencies, but I cannot offer them the full course of current literature approach to chemical dependency because I am not being able to work with a psychiatrist in order to be able to find the care that they need to have.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Anyone else here in favor of? Looking forward to your testimony, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Shannon Cooper this morning, again representing United We as well as Blue Cross and Blue Shield in support of this legislation. And again, I'm not real intelligent on these acronyms or anything, but one thing is very clear. You know, the newspapers were not full of stories during the pandemic that nurse practitioners were killing people all across Missouri because of bad care. And the fact of the matter is, they've done a great job. And through Blue Cross and Blue Shield in Kansas City with our relationship with SpiraCare, this issue became real when those emergency orders expired and we were faced with the fact that we had quality healthcare providers in an urban setting that were now outside the 75-mile radius. And what that equated to, and if you'll pull up the SpiraCare website right now, you're going to see the first thing on the page, it says, be patient. We are experiencing we are overwhelmed with calls. And part of that reason is those individuals that have been practicing for the last 2 years and providing quality care because of an arcane rule that 49 other states do not have, were suddenly denied the ability to continue the relationships with your constituents. And this is an issue that affects Representative Lewis in the Kansas City area or Representative Kelly in a rural area. But the fact of the matter is, this is a turf battle. And it's a turf battle that nobody understands. And at the end of the day, the people that vote to send you up here are the ones that are paying the price. And there are people right now, and I live with this, that are denied service in Henry County because you can't find a physician to engage in the collaborative practice. It is time to put this behind us and move forward. The pie is big enough for everybody. The needs in healthcare, no physician is going to go broke because these folks get to practice outside that 75-mile radius. And with that, I'll stop talking and try to answer any questions because I know a little bit more about this than I do interstate compacts.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for this witness? Wow. I guess you
dodged the bullet twice today, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. We're gonna have to miss.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jay Hardenbrook. I'm the Advocacy Director for AARP here in Missouri. And we really want to bring the consumer side to all of this. We don't provide healthcare services, but we have a membership that uses a lot of healthcare services. And we have, for the last 2 years, asked an incredible amount of nurses, and especially APRNs. A big reason why we had to lift these restrictions was because we needed them to do everything. We needed them to be able to do every different kind of job. And those nurses in the last 2 years have gotten 10 years of experience in the actual field. And now we are basically saying to them, you are no longer qualified to do the job that you have done so adequately for the last couple years. My daughter is going into nursing school now. In a different state, by the way. She is starting nursing school at another state because it's less expensive to go to nursing school in a different state than it is to go here in Missouri. I want her to want to come back to Missouri and practice here when she's done. And these restrictions are keeping these nurses that have traveled all over the country, that have done all sorts of work for your constituents and for our membership. It's urging them to move outside the state of Missouri. We had a healthcare worker crisis before this pandemic started. I shudder to think what it would look like if we put these continue to have these restrictions in place and continue to send high qualified healthcare professionals outside the state of Missouri.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Yes.
I've been sitting here and I've been wanting to ask this question, so I'm just going to go ahead and permission to inquire.
I was waiting for that.
You basically asked for it.
So I hear physicians might be against this. So if a physician would not want a nurse practitioner to work under this collaborative agreement, can they not allow that to happen?
Right now, under the current restrictions?
I mean, under the current and this legislation, if they would not want that nurse practitioner, if they, for whatever reason, like, I don't want this person, but I want this person, kind of basically pick and choose. I guess, is that up to them if they choose not to have that?
It really is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's, I'm just.
And then also with the mileage restriction, you have to be within the right area, right? So, yeah, there's many layers. But yes, they could just refuse to have a collaborative practice agreement.
Okay. I was just wanted to ask that question.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Any further here in favor?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bill Anderson on behalf of the Missouri Hospital Association. We want to go on record in support of House Bill 2434. Thank the sponsor for bringing it forward. Thank you for Representative Lewis for your work on this. This is an extremely important piece of legislation for us. The ability to have flexibility to deploy our APRN workforce during the pandemic has been critical in providing care to Missourians. And we feel that it's very important to keep those things in place. One thing I would note to Representative Cook's question, Chapter 334.104.11 protects physicians from being forced into being a part of a collaborative practice agreement. So that's already in state law. So with that, I would entertain any questions.
Okay, so let me just interrupt real quick. Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm going to ask for no questions at this time because there is a caucus meeting that started at 9, and I've just been told that we have to be there. So I am gonna ask though that is there anyone here any further that was here to testify in favor of? Oh my gosh. I'm gonna also ask for the people who have traveled here that are not lobbyists or people that are here all the time. Would you please come up? We want to accept your testimony real quick. I hate to be quick because I know you've traveled here, but if you could keep it to a minimum and not get into other things that people have already stated, I would appreciate that.
Thank you. My name is Sandra Headrick, and I'm a nurse practitioner. I've been in practice for 25 years. I currently practice in a rural county in south central Missouri, and I want to speak particularly to the 30-day rule. I am currently getting ready to start a new job that my old collaborating physician was supposed to go with me, so I wouldn't have that 30-day rule. Well, at the last minute, literally a week before I was supposed to start practice, she decided not to join the organization that I'm joining. So I had to find, graciously, another physician who I've known for a long time. He's familiar with my practice. But because of this 30-day rule, even though he is familiar with my practice strategies, my patient population, I am delayed giving care to my patients another 30 days because I have to follow him around for another 30 days. He is 30 miles away from where I'm going to practice. He is off-site. And because of this, my patients are waiting another 30 days for me to be able to give care. That is why I'm here today. I am not able to provide the care to my patients at this current time because of the 30-day rule. So I hope that you all will take into consideration this barrier to care, especially in the rural areas. I'm sure that it's a barrier in other areas, but being in a underserved rural area, this has really created a barrier to providing care for my patients.
Thank you very much for that testimony. Are there any questions? Thank you very much,
Thank
ma'am.
you for
We
the
appreciate
opportunity.
you coming here. For those who are here in favor of, I hate to do this to you, but you can submit that either online or through your witness testimony forms. I'm going to ask, is there anyone here that is in opposition?
I'll try to go fast. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Heidi Geisbuehler-Sutherland here on behalf of the Missouri State Medical Association. We are in opposition to this bill. I know that my colleague testified a couple of weeks ago on the home health portion of this bill. I was out sick with COVID, so I'm sorry I didn't actually hear his testimony in completion, but it sounded like there were some changes that we would be open to making in the home health portion of this bill. Medically necessary, just changing that to necessary, maybe adding some sort of regular collaborating physician review like every 6 months of the home health care plan or something like that. I'm happy to talk further with the sponsor about that. And then to the rest of the bill, I hate that this gets characterized as a turf battle because one of the most frequent complaints we hear from our physicians actually has to do with the contracts that they have to sign with their hospitals, and not with the people that they're collaborating with, the assistant physicians, physician assistants, APRNs, things like that. Even though they do technically have the option in statute to determine, the time frame that they're going to be continuously present and the charts that they review, ultimately in practice, our physicians feel like they get hamstrung by the hospitals that they work for. And so the fear here, I think, is that if you remove that 1 month requirement, and if you remove the specific chart review requirements, that they're really not going to have the option to be able to work with the provider that they're working with in collaboration to make those choices about what's going to work best for their patients and what's going to work best for their independent practice. And so that's all I've got. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know time is short.
Yeah, thank you very much for your testimony. Is there any quick questions for this witness? Representative Lewis.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you for being here. I understand what you're saying and the fear that your physicians you represent have. For the past 2 years, when we've been practicing under these waivers, has their fear become a reality?
To be honest, they've been so distracted with the pandemic, we haven't heard a lot of commentary on collaborative practices and how that's working out. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you, but they've just been doing other things. I know nurses have as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll keep moving on. Thank you very much for your testimony. One more quick. Come on. Real quick. I'm sorry to do that to you, sir, but
Mr. Chairman, would it be possible to come back and testify in opposition? I feel like this is a pretty significant change in state statute that I would hope the committee would at least have the opportunity to hear, some detailed testimony, data, and conversation before we change collaborative practice arrangements in this capacity. I'd be happy to come back at your convenience.
we can recess. The problem is I don't know when we're going to be able to come back, and I've got to talk to leadership to find out a time and a place that we can come back to.
And I respect the decision you make as chair. I feel like if we have detailed testimony each side, I feel like this is a pretty significant change that either way that we just hope to be able to have the opportunity to explain that to the committee.
Okay, so I'm being told that it looks as though we can continue this into next week. So is that correct? All right, so what we're going to do is we will, so we will adjourn